Before we actually get started in creating a project with any real determination, I think first of all it's worth going through the system requirements that Adobe specify when you want to run Premiere Pro. And then this way you can consider optimizing your hardware either by updating a graphics card, adding more RAM, or trying out a different disk drive. If you do want to keep informed and up to date on what Adobe recommends, then if you head over to Adobe's website, checking out the Premiere Pro page, you'll be able to navigate then to this particular page where you'll see these system requirements. I'm working on PC, it might well be you have to scroll down to check out the requirements for Mac. One of the first things that you'll notice about Premiere Pro is it requires a 64-bit operating system. You won't be able to install it on 32-bit. Now I know you might be thinking, why on earth have Adobe done this? Well, one of the reasons is because 32-bit operating systems can only utilize at most 4 GB of RAM, and the amount of RAM that you do have installed is a serious component when we are talking about optimizing our machines. By contrast to 32-bit, 64-bit operating systems allow you to include much more in terms of RAM. If you really want good performance, consider getting around 12 GB. Another factor is your CPU. Adobe recommend that you use 2 cores. As you'll probably know, the more cores the better, and this is a significant factor when we are optimizing our system because Premiere Pro is particular software that has been specifically written to make use of however many cores you've got on your system. I'm not saying you won't be able to run Premiere Pro on a lesser specification, but you will find it that much more laborious. So having lots of RAM and more than 2 cores for your CPU will come in useful because certain video formats require powerful uncompression during playback. Therefore, the more cores you've got, of course, will mean smoother playback. Now I mentioned the RAM a moment ago. 12 GB of RAM is recommended, although if you really want to push this out, go up to 16 GB. The minimum is 4 GB, but you'll still find that fairly sluggish. Now you might wonder why you need so much RAM. Well, you don't necessarily just to run Premiere Pro, but it's likely if you are running Premiere Pro, then you've got some of the other Adobe programs running in parallel, such as After Effects or Encore or even Audition or Photoshop. Therefore, the more RAM you've got, the better this will be. Now in terms of your hard drive, it's recommended that you use something called a RAID array. You'll probably know that hard drives today generally rotate at around about 7,200 RPM. If you've just got the one drive rotating at that speed, then yes, you'll get away with it, but perhaps you might want to increase this to 10,000 RPM. But that all said, you'll get much better performance if you use what I mentioned a moment ago, a RAID array system. RAID standing for Redundant Array Independent Disks. Now, in essence, what this particular system does is it splits your content across however many disks you've got in your RAID array. Consequently, the burden is shared. Something else to also consider when we are optimizing our system is the GPU, the graphics processing unit. Adobe recommend that you use certified NVIDIA cards. I know that's not always possible, and in fact creating these tutorials for you, I'm running Premiere Pro on my laptop. However, by contrast, in the studio, I do use an NVIDIA card. Okay, so that's some information then that should be useful to us when we want to optimize our hardware, so that when we run Premiere Pro, it runs that much more smoothly and is more pleasurable as a consequence to use. Now, I just want to provide a few details about the Mercury playback engine. If you've got one of the Adobe recommended video cards, which are predominantly NVIDIA cards, then you will be able to make use of the Mercury playback engine. You'll soon know if you can by coming up here, dropping down and flying out to the right and choosing that option. And then within this resulting dialog, you'll see that you've got this option here. Now my system at the moment is set up to the Mercury playback engine, and in brackets there CUDA, so I can take advantage of this. This would be unavailable if I didn't have a recommended card. Anyway, what exactly is the Mercury playback engine and why does it help? Well, you might already know that this Mercury playback engine does take an awful lot of the strain from our CPU. Instead, it loads it onto the GPU, the graphics processing unit, i.e. one of the Adobe recommended cards. Do bear in mind though that the Mercury playback engine won't be able to take advantage of your graphics card if it isn't one of these supported cards. This list that appears on Adobe's website ostensibly increasingly grows by the day. But as you can see, you can take advantage of the Mercury playback engine, but you will have to use it running in software mode. Okay, so that's a little bit of detail about this. Now, dependent on which card you get, they are quite expensive, but as you'll see as we progress through this course, they really will be a time saver for you. Anyway, we'll finish up here now that we've looked at optimizing our system and our hardware.